in the moment, if you can, see it, like become aware of it, like really see it, then it sort of loses its effect. It's like bring it into the light of consciousness, bring it into the light of your being, and it somehow loses its power. And whether it comes back or not, that's that remains to be seen. And maybe it will, maybe it won't, but um, that happens now. Like that process of moving through that happens now. That process of overcoming it, even though it's not so much an overcoming, but it's more of like a just seeing it, lovingly seeing it and accepting it, and then just doing it anyway.
I think going into this, we may have discussed in our last interview, which obviously hasn't been released yet because that's like the perfectionist interview that was recorded with a real camera, right? But like, I think I mentioned to you that I've had to overcome this barrier of perfectionism. Like I very often, especially when it comes to my music, have struggled to allow myself to finish. There's always something that can be better. And I don't know whether that's a good or a bad thing. And I know that you recommended the topic, purpose and intention aligning your life for today. And I think that's probably a nice place to start, at least for me. These are things that obviously you and I speak about and think about often, but I'm not sure, is this a barrier that you've personally encountered and had to overcome, or have you always been quite laid back about these kinds of things?
No, definitely. I mean, perfectionism is one way that I could word it, like one term that I feel, yeah, it does apply in my case too, but that maybe that's just like an aspect of it. I think for me, it's more like a thoroughness, like an authenticity. So perfectionism for me is not so much like I need everything to be perfect in order to feel good about releasing it, but yeah, it needs to feel true. It needs to feel like authentic to myself. I need to feel like relaxed and like I'm also being authentic in it. So in that sense, I can totally relate. And it ties in with today's topic. I think. I mean, there's a few different ways we can look at it, because on one hand, I feel like perfectionism, in one sense, is actually a nice aim to have, or it's like a nice way to approach things. Like you want to be thorough, you want it to be good, you want it to have a high production value, you want it, like, so all these things are really nice because it considers where you're coming from with it, right? It considers like the value that you want to contribute to it, but also it takes into consideration how it's going to be received and perceived, and like the quality of it. So all of that, I think that's great. But I think, yeah, when it comes to like limiting your output, or hesitating on sharing things, or procrastination, or doubting yourself, insecurity, that sort of thing, well, that's the other side of it. That's the light and the dark of it. So, and that we can look at it more in depth, more to the subtle layers. That goes right back to the beliefs that you have instilled from when you were a child, inherited, adopted from a young age. And those just sort of color your experience, color your mind, and influence how you live. And so
For sure.
I think that's just the process of it does seem to be a process. I think also it's like an instantaneous thing where, in the moment, if you can, see it, like become aware of it, like really see it, then it sort of loses its effect. It's like bring it into the light of consciousness, bring it into the light of your being, and it somehow loses its power. And whether it comes back or not, that's that remains to be seen. And maybe it will, maybe it won't, but um that happens now. Like that process of moving through that happens now. That process of overcoming it, even though it's not so much an overcoming, but it's more of like a just seeing it, lovingly seeing it and accepting it, and then just doing it anyway. Doing it
For
anyway.
sure. I think that it's actually such a nice metaphor for what we're about to discuss, because even there, like, let me explain to you my mental process here. So essentially, you were busy speaking and I'm listening to you and I'm noticing that the microphone is off center, right? And that's just the
Yeah.
perfectionist in me wanting everything to be symmetrical and for this to be like the best interview ever. Although I must say I've kind of let go of that before today, just because this is a long time coming and I would like not to have to obsess over things like these. Of course, you and I both have very busy schedules. And so if we were to obsess over every piece of film grain in this recording, we would never get any content out. And I think that would be a great shame. And so it does become a barrier to entry. It certainly has been for me. This is something that I would have loved to have started quite some time ago. And the thought that I would just be chatting to you now with a webcam on a computer is actually quite almost like unfathomable to my older self.
Yeah.
But then I look at something like Lex Friedman's podcast, who I'm sure you are very familiar with. And I mean, his video quality isn't exceptional. Like the lighting isn't amazing. It's not taking in like the perfect studio. And it doesn't bother me. It's so interesting
No.
how, you know, when we watch what other people do and they do great things, these things tend to just kind of be sit under the rug. It's like doesn't bother me at all when I watch Lex Friedman, or you know, if I watch Chris Williamson, he's on episode like 500 of his podcast. Like, would he have gotten there had he been obsessed about the camera and video quality from day one? I think not, and I think that is an amazing, a metaphor for life and what we're talking about today, because sometimes you just have to start, you have to get going and then just like improve the quality as you go, right? As opposed to, and that's all about alignment, right? You have to align what you can without obsessing. Otherwise you actually block the alignment of the guiding force that we have been speaking about. Then you don't allow your spirit to be open to the guidance and alignment of that loving spirit that we have spoken about in our previous interview. Perhaps we should kind of recap on that just for the sake of people listening, because otherwise they're going to have no idea what we're talking about. But
yeah, well,
probably better
also
you than
I also think that you know, just like the authenticity of us, you know, you sitting in the room that you're in and me sitting in the room that I'm in, and like not having it like studio, like, you know, those are nice qualities, having it like really professionally presented, but also to just show up as you are is also so nice. It's so natural. And I think just as you're saying with the Lex Friedman podcast and whatever else, it's like if the quality of the content is there and you can really feel that person's heart, and you can really like feel where they're coming from, like they want to do this because they love to do it and they want to do this because they want to help others, then, and as long as you can hear them and it's clear, and as long as you can see them and it's not like fuzzy or like cutting in or out, it's like, you know, there, especially today, I feel like there's so much more lenience, there's so much more accepted, you know, there's so much more acceptance, you know, people are willing to tolerate a lot more in terms of like, you know, it doesn't need to be like IMAX quality or like this or that. It's just like, how's the conversation, how's the content, is it interesting, is it relevant, you know, am I learning something? And there's a lot of leniency there. So yeah, it feels nice to just show up as
sure.
you are.
No, it does. And I think it's important. It's an important place to be, because the ego is such a strong thing. You know, oh, does my hair look good today? You know, what clothes am I wearing? You know, is the lighting right? What's in the background? Like, just for the sake of everyone listening, like I went and I unplugged a plug in the corner of the room just because it was bothering my OCD. And it's like, you know, if I really think about it, who would have actually been bothered by that except me, or noticed that? But then at the same time, it did bother me, and therefore perhaps turning it off was also a good idea for my sake then in this case. And so that opens a philosophical wormhole as well. So
Sure.
all of the above. But yeah, it's nice to just be relaxed. I completely agree with you. And I don't know, I think that because of the pressures of social media in the modern world, and you know, the projected self-image, perhaps there are many people who might feel the way that I'm talking about right now. I think you're just a little bit older than I am, so I'm not sure if you fit into the millennial category.
Yeah, well, I'm 32, so I'm not really sure what the categories, how the categories line up, but I might be in that. Yeah, I'm not sure
I
where I
think
am.
you just missed it, but like obviously you and I would have grown up with the development of smartphones and social media. And so we have been able to gradually become accustomed to these things, but still having had traditional parenting, which I think is a huge benefit, because we are in the middle of two worlds. Like we are accustomed to tech, we can use it, and we understand it and we can learn it quickly. But at the same time, we were kind of the last generation to enjoy just living before all of this. And it feels like a different world to think back to how things were. And it's actually something that I don't hear people talking about a lot. I mean, for me, I lived one of the most surreal, like, adolescent periods. Honestly, I think about it so often that I don't think I've ever had so much fun in my entire life. The fun that I had when I had zero responsibility and none of it was being recorded. You know, like the smartest phone that there was a Sony Ericsson device that, you know, we would download all sorts of cool infected mushroom like wallpapers on, and they would light up in multicolors, and we would play music and they would light up. And like, that was the most exciting thing technology could do, like the days of the iPod 1, right? But before that, yeah, like we used to go out and have fun and just be ourselves and be fine with that. And Facebook kind of changed everything.
Yeah, I totally know. I totally get what you're saying. There does seem to be a pressure from these things and from technology and from all the media outlets and even like socially to use these things, and you know, the ways that we can put ourselves online and all this. And I understand that. So from one point of view, like, yes, I would agree, but also um, it's it's sort of a nice excuse. In truth, it's a nice excuse to say, like, you know, there was a time before all of this where, you know, I felt more natural, I felt more alive, I felt more this or that, and or even to say like the generation previous to mine had it easier, all of this, right? The mind will come up with so many different ways to escape this moment now, and the free choice that you have now to just say, actually, I'm in control of my experience. I'm the one determining how free I feel, how joyful I feel, how, you know, how I want to show up, and any sort of pressures or stress that you know I may be experiencing. It doesn't take away from what people may be going through. That's totally valid, but um, to place it outside of ourselves, I don't think is helping. To say something like, you know, it's just the times that we live in. While I get that statement, and I think we can all relate to that, it removes the sort of responsibility or the ownership over just the power that you have, that I have, to, you know, create my reality, to create my experience as I want to create it. And there are a number of ways that, you know, we can create our reality using routine and architecture and, you know, just mental cleanup, emotional cleanup. All of these things are going to free you up in a way that no longer are you, you know, feeling pressured by media or technology or other people. They may still try to pressure you, but when you have reclaimed that power, that creator seat, which you can never actually lose, you can only pretend like you lose it. Like I can pretend like I give it to media, or I can pretend like I give it to you, and I can buy into that, but that's still me creating that experience of giving it to you. I'm still the one creating that, right? So if we can reclaim that power, which is, I am creating this regardless of where I say it's being created from, I'm still creating that, then at least we can be honest with ourselves, and we can then maybe shift into something that we would prefer, which is, okay, yeah, I have felt a little pressured by these things in the past, and maybe I even still experience it from time to time, but I'm actually going to choose now to maybe, you know, not give in to social media this morning before I do the things that I want to do, or I'm not going to allow my parents or, you know, my teacher or my peers to try to convince me to do something that I don't want to do, or do things because they think that I should, or I think that I should, you know, to reclaim that creator seat, and then, you know, feel the freedom that you have to just be. Like, you don't even need to do anything at that point. You can just be. You still can do things. And actually, that's when doing and creating becomes so pure and so powerful and so connecting with others, because it's not coming from a place of like, I need to do this, or I'm pressured to do this, or whatever it is, You know what I mean?
It's interesting. Yeah, absolutely. I know exactly what you mean. And firstly, it's just so lovely to hear you speak about all these things. And I'm surprised at how kind of antagonizing you with that brought so much out. So perhaps I'll play the antagonist for the entire conversation, which I would
No,
I
it's
would very much
perfect.
love to do.
And it's
I
not you.
mean,
It's actually just it's just the tendency that we have as humans, right? It's just easy to forget, and it's just the typical narrative that goes on in the world.
mm,
And you know, it's also comforting because then we can all look to each other and say, look, you know, we're all living in the same world. We're all dealing with the same pressures, and you know, like again, I understand like that from that point of view, it's true, but it's just losing sight of the truth that actually I can be the one to feel the way I want to feel. Like I can show up how I want to show up. I'm determining my reality, not something else.
that's something else that has been a breakthrough for me recently is, of course, we kind of tend to put ourselves in boxes because of the expectations of others in society. Now, the box that I was in was the box of the classical pianist. And this may come as a surprise, this very recording, once I upload it onto my YouTube channel, which has nothing but videos of me at the piano and my own compositions and compositions of other local composers. And I formed such a personal brand around that I've had people who have met me recently looking at my Instagram, which hasn't been posted on in more than 2 years, and saying, your Instagram doesn't really embody who you are. You should actually show the world who you are. Because XYZ, I don't want to go into too much detail about what they said, but I just found it very interesting. I kind of put myself in that box, and having been liberated from that box, not only of perfectionism, but also of you don't have to just be one thing. And I think that we feel too much pressure, especially in the West, to be one thing. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it can depend on like how you're raised. I mean, I have friends and people that I've met over the years where they were raised in a household where, you know, maybe their parents were artists or creative or whatever, and they seem to have a totally different outlook. But I would say that a lot of the people that I know and a lot of people that I've talked to, yeah, that sort of tends to be their experience. Like, you know, and even in business there was like a whole, or in the entrepreneurial kind of world there was a whole phase where it was like, you know, specialize, and I get that. I think it just depends on what sort of niche, you know, what sort of how your personality is kind of, you know, what you have blueprinted, like what your sort of blueprint is. For some people I think it does kind of make sense to specialize. Some people it's just in their nature, in their personality, to be more focused on one thing than many. But I think more so than ever before, seems to be this generation, this wave of people who are kind of like interested in everything and kind of good at everything, and not really having the ability to focus on one thing. And actually, I think the way that humanity is shifting, it's so nice to demonstrate, like it's so nice to just be yourself, and for that to be the demonstration of, look, I can't be just one thing. Because in truth, like, you know, we cannot just identify with one thing. You are so much more than just one thing, one idea, one concept, one identity. You know, like we are multi-dimensional beings, and even that is not even coming close to being accurate and true to like what we are. So to try to pin it down to one thing, you know, it might sound nice on a resume, but it's not the truth of like the, you know, the dynamic, you know, creative nature that you are, like that essence that you are.
It's interesting because you hear mixed reviews on that, even from some of the most successful people in the world. And that kind of speaks to how individual it is. Some people say, go all in on one thing. That's how you'll become successful. Spend all of your energy focusing on that one passion, that one dream. And sure, that's all good and well, but what about the rest of it? I find, at least now, that by diversifying my interests, I'm continually expanding this kind of ever converging web of my neural networks that all kind of started for me with piano improvisation. The thought that, okay, every time that I sit down at this piano and I choose to play something new instead of playing a pre-composed piece, I'm building new neural networks. I'm engaging in play with myself because I'm being somebody that I'm not each time. So I'm expanding my consciousness. And I kind of found it a little bit of a life hack, in all honesty. I thought, wow, this is a way to kind of jumpstart my personal intelligence. And I never took that outside of music. And now that I have, I've realized that there's a whole world out there. And in fact, I think that society tends to discourage us from this truth that we are so much more than just one thing, and so much more than perhaps just this physical vessel that we are in right now.
Totally. And I think there's also so much in what you just shared, because you first started by saying, like, the way that society tries, or the way we approach it in trying to be successful, right? And then you went into talking about playing the piano, and like the inherent difference between playing the piano and trying to be successful. Right in there, it says so much about the two different approaches, right? Because on one hand, trying to be successful has so many ideas baked into it, right? Like, trying to be successful is trying to prove that I am something, right? Or trying to achieve something, or trying to create something which will validate, or, confirm my worth through money, or through successful, whatever it is, credit from other people or whatever. That's a totally different kind of flavor, or totally different intention, or totally different energy than playing. It's like when you look at a child playing, they're not trying to prove anything to anyone. They're not aiming for a specific outcome. They hardly ever have expectations. And funnily enough, success is often, I would say always, a byproduct of being true to yourself, like, right, being authentic, like playing, like really like being yourself. So I think somewhere along the way, a lot of people, most people nowadays, like at least when you look online, we've lost sight of the truth of ourselves, and we've given it away to like trying to be successful, or trying to prove something, trying to create something. That's all just trying to fill the void, which of being worthy, like being valuable, loving yourself, being free to play, that all those things are inherently what you are. So we're compensating for what we think is missing by trying to achieve something, so then we can feel the thing that we already are. And it's so funny.
It is.
When you
It's
just want to
hilarious.
play
I'm
the
actually
piano. So you
exactly,
just want to play the piano.
exactly. And you were the one who said to me, whatever you feel in your heart is right to do at any time. That's what you should follow. And you were so right in that. And it's amazing how it's expanded outward, not just from the piano. I've realized that there are so many things that I can do and want to do. And there's no reason why I should not do all of them and follow whatever calls my heart at any moment. And I can't explain to you how much happier I am since that decision. So you are speaking truth. And even as I hear you saying these things, my heart is filling up with blood and I'm feeling wonderful. I feel a sense of warmth in my chest. And it's difficult to come by, I suppose, when everything that we are fed by the media and on social media is just putting us into this like perpetual state of negativity. And we're kind of in competition. It seems to me we're in competition with everyone. It's like the further that we can be divided into competition, the happier those at the top of the food chain will become. And it's interesting because just now you said we've forgotten who we are. And you also said that once we start to play like a child, that's when we discover true happiness. Now, my question to you is, should we be playing for ourselves, or perhaps is the purpose that we play for ourselves so that we can play for others? And perhaps that is a nice summation of the purpose of this existence.
Yeah, well, that's actually the perfect segue into the whole topic that we had intended, which is in purpose and intention, because those things are two sides of the same coin. So if I were to reiterate what you said, it's like on one hand we have the desire to be of service, or to contribute to society, to help other people. And on the other hand, we want to be happy. We want to follow our joy. We want to be true to our own heart. We want to do the things that we love to do. And are they mutually exclusive? Well, of course not. I mean, I say no way. Because first of all, someone really great once said, if you're not healthy, you're not helping. So firstly, like as a sort of foundation, that's so critical. And I think coming back to purpose and intention, being two sides of the same coin, I sort of define purpose as what you're aiming at, right? It's what you're going for. It's the vision that you have that you're creating in your life. And intention is actually where you're coming from. So one side of the coin is a sort of outward movement towards, so to speak. It's not always a movement outwardly, but for the sake of this conversation, we can look at it like, what am I aiming for here? What is the vision or the world that I want to create? What is it that I want to live in? And I'm aiming for that. And the intention is coming from the other direction. So it's actually, where are you coming from? And the beautiful thing that I have realized and experienced so many times is that when you are clear on your purpose, which is to say, when you are clear on the vision that you have for your life and for the world and for how you want to show up in the world, like what you want to create, then you actually bring that forward into this moment now. You actually create that experience in the moment now by intending to show up in that energy now, right? So if my purpose is to, which my purpose is, to put it very broadly, it's people being elevated, right? So it's elevating consciousness, it's uplifting people, right? That's the reason why I'm here on earth. I can say that in its most essential form. That's why I'm here. That's what drives me in everything that I do. It's to uplift humanity. And so how do you go about like doing that on a day-to-day basis, moment to moment? It's like that can seem like such a lofty thing. It's like, well, where do I even start? But where I start is in this moment now. So how am I showing up? Right? So if I'm aiming for uplifting humanity, like an uplifting experience for everyone around me, then my intention becomes being that. Like, be uplifting, like be in an uplifted state, be in an elevated state, show up in the best way that you can, be open, be honest, be loving, be kind, right? What better way to demonstrate how others can uplift and to be uplifting than to actually just own it right now in this moment, to walk into a room and be uplifting. So that's the two-sided sort of, you could call it a technique or whatever you want to call it, but it's really, what are you aiming for and where are you coming from? And they're actually not two different things. They're one and the same thing.
For sure. Now let's divide it further. So of course, on the one side, we have these thoughts appear in your head. They come from somewhere, and I would love to get into that later, but they come from a place that we don't understand. Quiet your mind long enough, they will continue to come. And they give us these ideas, perhaps, of what we could be or should be, or what we are, or what other people think that we are. And we perpetually filter through these strange happenings. And if we focus on the right happenings, then we can perhaps choose the way that we might call right. And that involves, as you just stated, being kind, being loving, being authentic, being the best person that you can be for others. So now let's divide that, because of course, along the path of being the best version of yourself, I suppose, there's a balance that needs to be struck as well between being kind and being strong. There are those that take advantage of kindness along the way. And we need to be able to discern who those people are. Like, so let's talk a little bit about that balance. Where do you draw the line in the sand between kindness, firmness, or strength? Putting your foot down, not becoming a doormat to people, because I think that a lot of people go through life, based on what I've seen, and they are the most wonderful human beings, and they're so kind, and they give their lives selflessly to others, but then they're confused when they don't get the results that they're perhaps seeking because others are taking advantage of them. What is that? What is built into us that we do that to others? And what would you say to people who have experienced that?
Well, I think that's just the process of becoming wise. Wisdom doesn't exclude love. Actually, we could even say wisdom is somewhat of a higher form of love, because it's not it's not actually wisdom to not be loving. There's always love baked into wisdom. But and when I say that, I mean, I'm more referring to like a discernment. So, if we're talking about like freely loving or unconditionally loving or being kind to everyone, um, that doesn't exclude the discernment which comes through experience of, yeah, not losing respect for yourself, because people can disrespect me all day, and all night. That's okay as long as I'm respecting myself. And actually, funnily enough, if I'm respecting myself and I am, setting up, boundaries that are serving me and serving others, and I'm clear, I communicate clearly, I'm honest, I'm transparent about, what my intention is, where I see this going, if I have any expectations, if that's all clear, then actually I'm very respectful to myself. And most of the time, that basically removes the opportunity for anyone to disrespect you. And even if for whatever reason they still do, that's where discernment, I think, comes in. And it's like, well, I've learned from dealing with this person that if they're going to accept or maybe not accept my love and my kindness and my generosity or whatever else that the relationship is involving, if they're just going to disrespect that, then the most respectful thing that I can do is to remove them from my life, to say goodbye to them. Otherwise, again, if I reclaim the creator seat of my life, if I reclaim that ownership over my experience, I'm the one in that case which is being disrespectful to myself because I'm tolerating that, right? So I can't control other people, or at least I don't care to. I'm not interested in trying to control other people. If people want to be a certain way, that's their own thing, and they're learning their own lessons, and that's fine by me. But if it's going to impact me or influence me in my experience, that's my responsibility, and I take that on.
So how do we discern between those who can be trusted, those that are worth keeping around as soon as possible? Like, what are some of the qualities that you look for in the people that you keep in your company, that you are friends with?
Well, I think it totally depends on the nature of the relationship. So if you're talking personally, that would be different than, like, in terms of business or in terms of, collaborative efforts. So, but like, disrespect is disrespect, and there's not much room for that. Like, there's very little room for that,
Mm.
if any at all.
What I mean is, so let's say you've just met somebody, and I think that both you and I are probably able to cold read people quite well at this point, probably because we've had our fair share of socializing, I'd say. And so what I'm asking is really, how would you quickly discern between somebody who is probably worthwhile letting in the door and getting to know you, kind of on an immediate cold read? Like, what can people look for in others that will either be red flags or green flags when it comes to the kinds of people that we should keep around us? Because it does seem to me like the people that we keep in our company have a massive impact on what we can achieve.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in that case, I would say, you know, where they're coming from matters most to me. And there are so many different levels to that. Like, yeah. So that also depends on the relationship. But basically, like, how transparent do I feel them to be? Like, do they say one thing and do another, or what is their desire? Are they honest about their desire? What do they have expectations? Like, are they clearly communicating those expectations? um yeah, so many things, but the essence of it, or like the overall feeling of it, is like, how close do I feel to this person, right? Like energetically, like experientially, how close, how intimate does this feel like? And I think everyone kind of recognizes on some level or not, like, the sort of intimacy of a relationship, whether it's, they're kind of like, pretending to be something, or hiding something, or trying to, like, hyperbole, like trying to make things seem like something else or whatever. It's like, so the quality of a like the hallmark of a true, like a truly um like a true relationship is, I think, honesty and transparency. Because I, in that sense, I don't even really need trust, right? Yeah, in that case, I don't even feel like I really need trust, because everything's on the table. Like, if I can really feel who you are and where you're coming from, then I suppose that is trust. Like, if I don't have any second thoughts, or if you're kind of, as I said, like saying one thing and doing another. I'm not really sure if that answers the question, but it seems like so dependent on the situation. So I'm not sure how I would kind of bring it into one response, one general response.
Sure. I think it also boils down to what similarities do I share with this person? Like, what do we have in common? And if you have refined yourself, I'm sure you're going to love what I'm about to say, because this probably aligns with exactly the kind of thing that you would teach. And I'd love to see that sparkle in your eye again. But if I align myself to the point where I've refined my soul and my body and my spirit, that I know myself and I am the best version of myself, don't you feel that there's a kind of attraction in other people then toward that? We tend to like attracts like. Sure, opposites attract as well. Perhaps that's what it boils down to. Perhaps opposites attract so that we have something to learn from those opposites. But when it comes to like attracts like, I enjoy spending time with people such as yourself, who I have things in common with, but also that I feel that I can grow from at the same time. And perhaps that requires me to see in you what I've not yet become. I see in you what I've already become, and yet I see in you what I've not yet become. And I wish to, through your company, gain those things. And perhaps that's a nice lens to look at things through when looking for new people to surround yourselves with, to be able to discern, who is it that I am first and foremost, and then who do I want to be? And who is it that I can spend time with that will help me become that person? And that's exactly where people like you come into the picture, people who guide others to that state of enlightenment. Don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah. Yeah, it for whatever reason, it brought back the thought of the question you asked before, which was, something along the lines of, like, like it was related to the whole, like, if you're not happy, you're not helping thing, like, to demonstrate that. And I think, yeah, and as you talk about like attracts like, I think that's sort of the best way to sort of filter, if you want to say it like that, by attracting, like, what how you're being, or what you are, attracts a certain kind of people into your life, right? And it's, I think your ability or your willingness to not compensate there, which will then have certain people fall out of your life. So I think discernment is a quality which helps to kind of do this filtering, but also the very nature of your being will do the filtering as well. And I think this is also where it ties in, like, um, uh, it's just another way of saying, like, the caliber of who you are will attract in certain people, and that caliber will also be the bar which um, only allows for certain people to stay with you, so to speak. So yeah, naturally people will fall away who are not willing to meet you at that level, not willing to continue at that level, at that caliber, because that's just the level that you've set, for your life. That's just the intention, the quality that you're moving through life with. And so if you are not willing to compensate there, if you're not willing to compromise in that, then I feel like in my experience, a lot of this like sort of overthinking or overanalyzing, trying to not be, taken advantage of or not be disrespected, all of that just sort of takes care of itself. At least from my experience, I can't speak for other people so much, but that's from my experience been the case, where it's like, if I'm going to respect myself and I'm willing to hold that bar and not compromise on it, then people will come and people will go, and that's fine.
You make it sound so easy. If only it was.
Well, it's not easy for sure. I mean, I don't intend to make it sound like either that I have it all figured out, or that that I haven't struggled with this, because it's been a learning experience. But that's just the way, that's just the way that I see it. That's just the way that I approach it now. But certainly that's come through experience. It's not some sort of conceptual textbook thing that I just want to regurgitate. It's like, this is the way that I experience it. So, but that comes with that's come from challenge, for sure.
What would you say that your biggest challenges have been to get to the point where you are now, that helped you grow into the human that you are now?
Well, yeah, I think the biggest challenge that I've had is really being true to what I'm feeling, like being willing to feel what I'm feeling, and to be honest about that, and to share that, to communicate that, to not shy away from that. um I love my parents, but I was raised in a household, in a sort of dynamic where sort of a there was love, but it was sort of a distance. Like there was a distance in terms of intimacy. Like, I could even say a bit of a coldness. It didn't necessarily feel like at the time. At the time, um, and when I was younger, like when in my younger years, there was definitely affection and love. But for whatever reason, around like 6 and onward, there was just a bit of a distancing. And I think my parents have their own beliefs, their own ideas, their own ways of perceiving themselves. And I can now recognize some like insecurity there, and fear of intimacy, and that's the way that I look at it now. And so that upbringing, in reflection, feels very like, it feels like a very distant kind of relationship. Whereas now, like I'm at Rulika's parents' place, and it's a totally different dynamic. Like, everything is very sentimental. It's very like kind and loving. And my household growing up was like very direct, very honest. Everything's on the table. And so in that sense, it was very nice. Like, it felt kind of safe in that way, because you knew what everyone was feeling, what everyone was thinking, because they made it very obvious to you. But it was also sort of loud and intimidating and kind of controlling. So I learned from that to kind of distance myself from what I was feeling, because if I shared what I was feeling, if I was honest about my emotions, they were often misinterpreted, or they were twisted into something. Or if I pointed out something that felt off or whatever it was, it was often like turned back towards me. And so on one hand, the environment felt safe from the point of view of like, okay, I know what's up for you, and I know what you're thinking, and this is all on the table. But it felt unsafe from the point of view um, like there was no intimacy, like there was no true connection. So I didn't really feel safe to like share what I was going through, because they just didn't really have the capacity to like meet me there. They didn't really have the understanding, like the means to actually like be with that. So I coped by retreating and hiding and escaping and distancing myself from my feelings, because if I could just not feel this, or if I could not, experience this emotion, or this way of thinking, or this whatever it is, then, on the surface I'm calm, I'm cool, I'm collected, and outwardly I'm perceived that way. But inwardly, there's like a whole like shitstorm going on. And, so I got really good at like pretending like everything was good, but actually inwardly, I was so disconnected from myself. And so I think the biggest challenge for me, in my adult life, has been to actually reconnect with my emotions, like really feel the safety and there's so much wisdom and insight in those feelings. But because I wedged a huge space between them and myself, I cut out so much of, my connection to others and the empathy that I could tap into in working with others. I feel very much drawn to other people, and guiding or working in that way with people and with teams. So there's so much intelligence in that capacity to feel and allow that to move. Because also what happened was, even when I would feel things, I would kind of like trap them, in certain areas of my body, or I would hold, certain things, or I would suppress things or repress things or whatever it was, try to manipulate and control these things so that it wasn't fully experienced. Because, whether it was crying or anything like that, it was just misinterpreted. There was a total lack of understanding of that, and made into something superficial or something surface level, when actually, a lot of the time there was nothing really wrong. It was just something that was moving. It was just something that was happening. But because
I can,
I didn't really have, anyone there to kind of be with that, I developed this coping mechanism to kind of push it away, and therefore the intelligence that comes with it.
I completely relate to that. In fact, my heart almost sank as I was listening to you speak, because I've been through the same thing. Not exactly the same thing, of course, we're all on our own unique journeys here, but I have experienced that when, what we feel is not accepted by others, or perhaps others aren't ready to receive us in our full being, who and what we are. How's your relationship with your parents now? Like, and when did that all change for you? When did you feel like you could just let go and be you and be everything that you are?
Yeah, I mean, my relationship with my parents is good. I mean, it's great. But there's still a distance, I would say. Like, and I even still struggle with like fully being myself around them. Um, that conditioning, that patterning is just apparently so ingrained, and so deep that it's just somehow difficult to just fully be myself with them. I see so much, like when I'm around them, it becomes so obvious where this sense has come from, where this feeling has come from, where this distancing has come from. And it somehow sort of reactivates it. So even like in the world, and as I move through this, and as I process this, and as I open up more and more to myself, I feel like it shifts, and I feel like that part of me is in the past. Somehow when I'm with them, it comes back online. It's like that saying, you think you're enlightened, go spend a weekend with your family, or a week with your family. Everything just comes back to the surface. So I would say that my relationship with my parents is good now, but you know, I have been much more intentional and conscious and willing to do the work, and to continue to do the work. And so I feel like I have changed so much. And while they may have changed a bit, they have not had that same focus, that same intention. So yeah, it feels like the gap becomes bigger and bigger, even though I'm more accepting of them. I'm more accepting of myself, and I'm totally content to be around them. It just that distance is still there, that emotional distance is still there.
What do you think that they would say if they heard you saying that?
Well, yeah, I think that there's the possibility that we can kind of meet each other to some extent, and to, yeah, to resolve this, or whatever, if we want to say resolve it. I think it just depends on yeah, how willing I am to be honest, and how willing I am to yeah, to dig deep and to be real, you know, to be authentic with how I'm feeling, and yeah, and how ready they are to hear it, like, and not turn it into something, a blame or something like that, because I even though I can't deny that the conditioning, this sort of programming, came from them. Of course it did. That's the role our parents play, for better or for worse. That's just where it comes from. Um, Regardless of that, I don't blame them for it, because I also see that they're a product of their environment, right? They're a product of their own upbringing. So this is like something that goes way, way, way back. So I can't actually blame them for it, even though it came from them and it came from my experience of being raised by them. I don't hold it against them. So, I mean, yeah. How would they respond? I don't know. That's a good question. I think that's something that I'm still kind of working up the courage to actually have that real conversation with them. I guess we have conversations about it, but it never has quite gotten that deep, I guess.
Well, it's like I said earlier, people have to be ready to receive that kind of thing as well. Not only to receive you, but to receive in turn your opinion of them. I mean, they clearly have such strong opinions of you, and that's affected you quite deeply, and that resonates with me. It's like on the one hand, on the one shoulder, if you will, we have all of these people that we know, and perhaps people that we don't even know, but have a certain idea of and respect. And their voices are just silently uttering their soliloquies on one of our shoulders. And on the other shoulder, we have that beautiful and pure voice that once we start listening to that voice, things start to change.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think that you did say, like, what was it that was the shift for you in all of this, that took you from that conditioned self that was affected by those things? What was that moment of enlightenment, that aha, I can just be me? Was it a person? Was it you just listening to the right voice? What was that?
Well, I don't think I can say that it was a moment in particular. I mean, there definitely have been moments, insights, realizations, deepening, embodying more and more. And some of those felt significant. Some of those felt, quite transformational. But any one in and of itself would not be, would not be complete. So there has been, like, sort of a process of deepening, and but I would say that for me it sort of started more kind of mentally, like the realizations that I was experiencing were more kind of, I would say, like on a mental level, like realizing how free I was, and how, like, conceptually or theoretically, so to speak, I I wasn't limited to whatever thought I had, or whatever belief that I was holding. So that kind of cracked open the door, that kind of blew it open in a way of, like, okay, I'm not limited to the way that I was raised. I'm not limited to the way that my mind is sort of constructed right now. that's more or less just like a patterning. That's more or less just a framework with which I'm very familiar with. But so in that sense, there was kind of like a zooming out and like an expansion, but it was mentally mostly at first. And so now, as I've been describing this sort of emotional maturity or this emotional reconnection, that's where it kind of went from my head more down into my heart. And I think that's kind of where I'm exploring now, or what I'm deepening into now. Whereas like experientially, I can feel more and more free. I can feel more and more myself. I can feel more and more, courageous and bold, and, you know, just a capacity to be that, to fully experience that and embody that, rather than it just sort of being, a conceptual mental kind of thing, which I come back to. And I can say that I know it, or I can say that I feel it, but it's not the same thing as feeling it. Like, it's not the same thing as it really being my experience. So, um, this is still a process. This is still a journey, so to speak, that I'm on, that I'm deepening into. And yeah, that's where I'm at with it right now, if that answers your question.
It does. And I don't want to linger on it too long, as not to become too philosophical or even psychological, so to speak. But I am interested to know, have you distanced yourself from your family because they've had that impact on you? Or have you just found that through your experiences and your growth, you have not even had to do that, that you might retreat into that old state by spending time with them, but you don't really have to fully distance yourself from them? Of course, they're your family, so it's difficult. But sometimes we have to remove the people from our lives who are really bringing us down. And in
Yeah.
this case, I know that you have been traveling the world, and then my second question would be, do you feel that your travels, seeing the world, experiencing new things, have helped you become who you are? Like, what kind of a role has that had in your personal development, seeing
Yeah.
the world?
Well, firstly, I definitely have distanced myself from my parents, at a time. And I I think there is a time, there is a time and a place for that distancing. Like, especially, throughout my high school years, my later teenage years, my early 20s years, that was a period where I was like, consciously distancing myself from my parents, because I was, really focused on unplugging myself from that conditioning, from that way of thinking, from those patterns. And I think that was necessary. I think it was necessary to create somewhat of a buffer between myself and those patterns, as a way of, attempting to dissolve them and really disconnect them. So, and I think, I see this all over the place. I think, whether you do that in your household, or whether you remove yourself from the household and do it that way, I think for a time and a place, it's necessary. I'm not distant from my parents anymore. Actually, funnily enough, Rulika and I were in Canada. We spent, to my own amazement, 3 months with my parents, living. They just moved to a beautiful property in Ontario, in between Toronto and Ottawa. And yeah, they got a beautiful property on the lake. And Rulika and I were in New York. We were there for a conference, and my dad's birthday was the week afterwards. And we thought, well, let's go and visit my dad for his birthday. It'd be sweet to go and spend some time with them. And we thought we would be there for a week, but 1 week turned into two, and turned into three, and turned into a month, and turned into 2 months, and 3 months later, we're still there and we're still with them. And it was a great experience. Like, and it was a totally different experience because Rulika was with me, of course. So also, that's where a lot of what I was just talking about with this emotional kind of connection and reconnection, and emotional, embodiment, and the deepening of that experiential kind of embodiment. A lot of that happened during that phase, this past summer, for the 3 months that we were there. And with Rulika's different perspective, and it just allowed me to see them in a different light. It allowed me to experience myself in a different light around them. So yeah, that was somewhat of a healing, I think, for our relationship between my parents and myself. And so, like 10 years ago, I would say that I definitely distanced myself from my parents. And that at some point in the last few years, I feel like I realized that I was now using that to escape something, to run away from something, which was actually offering me so much, like healing and recognition and acceptance, which for the part of the journey that I'm on now is absolutely crucial. Like, I'm not going to embody, I'm not going to mature emotionally if I cannot feel free around my parents, if I cannot be myself around my parents. And I'm not saying that I even want to prove that, but like, if I'm running from that, then it's not true. It's not actually, it's not a full-bodied experience of freedom or emotional connection with myself. Um, so that's changed a lot. Yeah, that relationship, in that sense, has changed a lot. And in terms of traveling, yeah, I think it's helped a great deal. I mean, especially in the phase where I was kind of distancing myself, I could say, from my parents, but it's not really the intention. My intention was to distance myself, or at least get perspective on the way that my mind was kind of formed, the patterns, the habits, the beliefs, the ways of thinking. I wanted to, I had a desire to expand out of that. And so meditation and reading and learning and working with certain people, and the business and all these things, and travel, of course, immediately puts you into a whole new perspective. It puts you into a whole new environment. It puts you around people that have totally different cultures and ways of thinking. And so I think travel, yeah, absolutely, I think it contributed greatly to that shift in perspective.
I'm so pleased to hear that, firstly, you do have a repairing relationship with your parents as a result of the company of your wonderful partner, whom I, of course, met, and I adore both of you. And to draw some threads together, of course, earlier we spoke about the company that we keep. And perhaps if you were with somebody who, instead of liberating you from the limitations of your past, reinforced them, I mean, how different a situation that would be. It's such a great highlighting of just how important it is who we surround ourselves with and who we choose. I mean, we obviously can't choose our parents, but we can certainly choose our friends, and we can choose the people that we are romantically involved with. And it's a really important decision. And I
Yeah.
think that I can't stress that enough. I think that it's perhaps best that we kind of summarize what we've spoken about here and leave the rest for episode 2 next week, Thursday. Looking forward to that very much. But, if we were to summarize it so far, so we're talking about aligning your purpose, how would you summarize the points that we have discussed? Like, if you just had to steel man it based on our current discussion points.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think we sort of got into it, but I think there's a lot more to it. But for sure, we can explore it more deeply in subsequent conversations. But um, I mean, yeah, with this whole idea of purpose and intention, like purpose being what guides you, what you're aiming for, the kind of world you want to live in, the vision that you have for this world, for your life, and then bringing that into this moment with the intention, like the energy that you bring to this moment actually creates that world right now. It creates that life right now. And by aligning with that moment to moment, actually that's what creates that world in a more linear way, like in a way which then you see moment to moment, rather than just it being an experience which is here and then fleeting. And then we can all relate to that. Like I know that well too. Like, yeah. But actually it's the alignment to that. It's the focus on what you're aiming for, and it's the willingness to come back to that intention, that energetic, where you're coming from, to bring that into this moment now. If you align your life in that way, shit changes. Like everything changes. Like, so it's your willingness to not compromise on that as the foundation, I think, which accelerates things very quickly. And so, it feels quite relevant, everything that we got into today in terms of that topic, because, like, as I said, my calling or my purpose is people being elevated, like uplifting humanity, like raising the consciousness of humanity. And I can only do that if I'm being that. And in my own journey, in my own growth, so to speak, in my own learning, on my own path, if I'm not becoming more of that, if I'm not embodying more of that, if I'm not doing the work, if I'm not really embodying all that I am, which is infinite, which is there's yeah, if I'm not embodying that, and desiring and moving more into that each moment, then I'm stifling my calling, right? I'm not living up to my purpose, because uh you know um I'm just not being true to what I say I'm all about. And if I say I'm all about raising the consciousness of humanity, and if I'm willing, to step into whatever that means in this moment, being vulnerable, like being honest, like whatever this moment is calling for, that's where you're going to find that. And so it doesn't always look the same. It doesn't necessarily look like a motivating thing or an inspiring thing. It can also look like an emotional thing. It can look like, we've covered quite a spectrum today, I think, and there's even more depth to that too. But uplifting humanity, I think I've even come to terms with that really means. It means being real. It means being what you are. And it means, like, creating a space where everyone can be that. Whatever it is what it is. And
I
that's
think that
beautiful.
it is. And I think that by being that version of yourself, by being your best self, how can you possibly bring others down? Because you're on an
Right.
upward trajectory. You're not on a downward trajectory. It's impossible to bring others down. And if you think about the effect that people have on us when they have a negative impact on us, it's because they themselves aren't embracing that upward trajectory. And so it
Yeah.
shows you how, if we embrace that upward trajectory, we are not only lifting ourselves up, but everyone who is connected to us. And some people are obviously more connected to us than others. But if you're always on that trajectory upward, and I suppose upward in a spiritual sense as well, looking up at the divine blueprint and being the best version of yourself that you can be, for yourself, for God, for your higher power, etc., how can you not lift others up? And so I think that
Exactly.
that's a wonderful point for us to delve deeper into next time. But I just want to say thank you for speaking with me. You and I were strangers, and we just so happened to strike up a conversation randomly in a coffee shop, and that has turned into a budding friendship that I'm very grateful for. You've been in the room with people that I greatly admire, such as Tom Bilyeu, and have encouraged me, and I'm sure many others, to embrace who they truly are. And it is the perfect example to anyone listening of exactly what needs to be done. Be the best version of yourself, and you will guide others onto that same trajectory, and you will all rise up together to that inevitable divine. And so I just want to say thank you for chatting with me, and thanks for all of your wisdom and insights. The fact that this is information that is free, I find that deeply admirable, and I'm deeply grateful that I get to be on the receiving end of that. So thank you.
Likewise. Yeah. Thank you, man. I so appreciate the opportunity to do this and the space, that you're creating for this. And yeah, and I want to thank you too, because it's a dynamic, it's a two-way thing. So, it wouldn't be possible without you. And I just appreciate everything that you are. I really do.
Thank you, man. Thank you, brother. I look forward to seeing you next time.
Yeah. Cheers, man.